Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us again. I'm Josh.
And I'm Sarah.
And we are the Hiking Fools, guiding you through the trails of Glacier National Park. And we are continuing a conversation with a very special guest, Denny Olson, in the studio with us today. You're not even going to hear everything. We're having some great conversations in studio that eventually we'll put on the air or on the episode, maybe in the future. So we're just going to tease that a little bit and ask Denny to come back at some point. But we were talking in part one a lot about birds, and we're going to continue that conversation. But also, he's got some great legends and lore of wildlife in the park and some of his favorite experiences. And you can know some things, but we're going to hear about a few things that you maybe don't show up on a general internet search that Denny has experienced himself. And we're just having a lot of fun, and hope you are as well. But Denny, we wanted to hear a little bit more about the things that are unique and that are special in a place like Glacier National Park.
I'm happy to do that. And you've given me tacit permission to tell all the lies that I want to. So.
Sure. Microphone is yours.
Well, I think one of the coolest things about Glacier is all of those little hidden stories that nobody knows about. I call them, I bet you didn't know this stories. And one of those things that's kind of obvious. Everybody goes to the park looking for bears. And the tourists are hoping that they're not going to get buried in an avalanche to shoot someplace. But I think bears are at their very best when they're sleeping, sort of like me. And when they're sleeping in the winter, they lower the body. They just do a sort of hibernation compared to the real hibernators. They could still wake up if they need to, but mom grizzly bear and mom black bear both will have cubs. They're born about a pound. They're really tiny little things, and they have to find their way to the milk, and then on their own, and mom is still snoozing away. But the thing about bears is that when they go to sleep, they're looking at a 5-month stretch sleeping. And during that entire 5 months, both males and females do not, I don't know if I can say this on the radio, but poop. They don't defecate,
Sure.
And they don't pee, either one. And, if we tried that for a week, we would be so toxic we would have to be in the hospital. And those guys resorb all of that waste material, and their physiology can turn it into muscle tissue. And so they lose their fat, they sleep, they lose their fat, and they gain muscle. I want that workout program.
You could sell that. I think you could sell that.
I could sell that, yeah. But it's just an amazing piece of physics. Plus, they eat the poop of the babies, and they turn that into muscle tissue for themselves as well. So the den stays relatively clean. When they do wake up, they kind of clean up, and then they go back to sleep again. So that's just an amazing. So sanitary districts eat your heart out for recycling. Those guys are masters at that. Another one that I really like is goats, and everybody sees the goats up at Logan Pass, and they're there for two reasons. One is that when we are there in mass going up that boardwalk, the grizzlies and the cougars and the wolves are not, and so the goats aren't stupid, and so they hang around us. And the other reason they hang around us is because when we go back and have an emergency and go back behind the tree, they are often there almost way too soon. I've heard of stories of people being bumped off of the spot where they're going potty because they do like the minerals in human urine,
right,
which is something they crave. And so when the males are in the fall, when they're getting frisky and they're starting to wink at the girls, they have to establish their peck order, and so they will stand head to tail and kind of hook each other with those really sharp horns in the rear end, and they have about a 5/8 of an inch thick piece of rawhide right back there, so there's no blood drawn. It's just basically like being across the line of scrimmage and who wins that, So that, and then that establishes a dominance order, and then the dominant ones get to go over to the girls and sit down, sprawled, their legs out, and they on the ground, and straight out, and they sit, and then they paw dirt up on their long belly hairs as they're sitting there. But to get it to stick, they pee straight up in the air, so it wets the dirt as it goes on. So when you're in the fall, if you see a male with a dirty belly, you know that he's ripe and ready to girl, and the girls are going to really love that. The only other place I've ever seen that behavior was a bar in northern Wisconsin, just north of Green Bay. It's just it was
makes sense.
And
makes
it didn't work there.
Yeah, no, that's funny.
And it wasn't me. Okay.
All right. Let it be known. Yeah. So, and you out there, I mean, we're guiding you through the trails of Glacier as we talk about it. And a lot of times we will discuss distance, elevation, those type of things. But what we're learning today and hearing from Denny is what makes it what it is. Yeah. And so these are fascinating.
Yeah, it's you could hike for a workout, but you can hike and observe for a workout too. And I like the observation part big time. It's more fun.
It's mind, body, spirit, nothing better.
I know. And then there's one other thing that's kind of weird that hardly anybody knows about. There's a frog that lives way up at the high elevations where there's above the tree line, in the fast moving creeks that have ice in them practically year round. Called the tailed frog, and it's got the male's got a little appendage on the back, which is a fertilizing thing, of course, and females have to carry their eggs inside of themselves until they hatch, and so they hatch inside her, and then she expels them out into and the little tadpoles have little sucker mouths, and they're mostly a big mouth with ridges on it, and they actually attach onto the rocks in these fast streams, and they will swim upstream, scraping the rock, and they eat the algae off the top of the rocks, and that's how they grow. But the water is so cold that they take, instead of like normally 4 weeks to turn into a frog, they take 4 years to turn into a frog. And so they're tadpoles for a very long time just because of the coldness of that water. Really odd adaptation for an amphibian, because their body temperature's got to be the same as where they are. And the other thing that's cool about them is they did some genetic testing on them, and they found out that the closest living relative that they could find was another frog that lives in New Zealand. And nobody swam there, no. But they think that has to do with back in the day, the Pangea thing, where the continents were kind of like crowded together, and then moved apart. So that's the reason that they're closest. But that's a weird frog, yeah. And then, of course, there's always moose. Moose males, no offense, Josh or me, but the males are sort of clueless in the mating season. They kind of walk around and they have this strange, their neck is swelling and their other antlers are getting hard and they feel feisty and want to match their antlers up with each other. And they go find places where they drool all day long, and that saliva collects down on that bell below their mouth, and then they roll in the mud and go potty all over themselves while they're rolling in the mud, and they don't have any idea why they're doing this. It's like, but the girls are standing around smelling. And so that's when it gets pretty ripe, that's when it becomes Sadie Hawkins Day. And so the girls get to go ask the guy to dance, and sometimes they have to chase him around for a while. But finally, when he gets to the point, she's doing this instead of doing her, which she normally, but she does instead, and he goes, oh, that's what we're talking about. And so when they get together finally, the male will rub that stinky bell of stinky saliva over her back to sort of like, it's sort of like an engagement ring, I guess. And then after that, you have to talk to your mom and dad about what happens after that. So,
yeah, sure, yes. Check it out. Yeah. Well, we've got just a little more time before our break, Denny. One other animal do we need to know about? And I will agree with you. These are bet you didn't know that stories.
Yeah, pikas are pretty cool. I mean, they're cute little buggers, and they're very sensitive. They live in the talus slopes, below the cliffs, and the talus has to be either 1 foot, maybe to 10 feet in diameter. So it's got to be pretty coarse. So there are natural openings because they're in the rabbit family and they don't dig. Right. They're not like rodents. And they're little round potatoes with ears, as somebody once said, and they're cute little buggers, and they do that eep, sort of thing. But they're really sensitive to temperature. They in the summertime they cut grass and different kinds of vegetation, and they make hay piles under the rocks, and that's what they eat all winter. So they have to get all of their food for the whole winter, and then they will when they do that they're very neat. They have a latrine where they only go, so they have their own potty place, and if they're out in the summertime and it's over 75 degrees, and sometimes it gets that warm at high elevations. If they can only be out for 2 hours or less, because it will kill them, if they're very sensitive to hot temperatures, but they're also very small, and so they're sensitive in the wintertime when they're under the rocks and the like. They don't hibernate; they're running around under the rocks, under the snow cover, and if the snow cover isn't thick enough for the insulation that they give, then they can freeze to death. So they're very vulnerable. They will, and whether or not you believe that climate change is happening and what's causing it and all that sort of thing, it doesn't spell good news for the pikas for both reasons, because the hotter summers and for fewer and less snow on top of you and for insulation, that translates to kind of a bad deal for those guys.
Yeah, these wildlife characters, they're an important part of Glacier, and we've got a little more time with Denny, so we're going to take a short break. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
The best part of a long hike? The view at the top. The best part of Freedom Bank? Seeing our customers reach their goals. We bring you the tools to bank anywhere, the service you expect from a neighbor, and the determination to make things happen. Let's make your financial view as stunning as Glacier's peaks. Freedom Bank, we want to be your bank. Give us a call at 892-1776. Member FDIC.
Welcome back. We are the Hiking Fools and have been talking with Denny Olson now for a good amount of time, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We certainly have, learning so much. There's one more critter out there, some wildlife that's very rare in the park, and it sounds like you've got some stories and or experience with the wolverine.
Yeah, wolverines are, on the average, we probably think there's somewhere around 30 to 35 in the park. They have massive home ranges because they're scavengers, and they're out in the winter. They got big feet for walking on top of the snow. And they have this reputation because they can chase a 500-pound grizzly off of a kill just with pure, unadulterated attitude, and they're only 40 pounds, and so they've got this reputation of being fierce, angry loners, the kind you wouldn't want to meet on the street. And we found out after 2000 and 2005, there was a group of folks who did some satellite tagging in the park. And
I just finished Mr. Chadwick's book. Just finished it. So I read it years ago and multiple times.
And Doug wrote a book about that, and it was part of the process. Anyway, so what they found out was they do travel a lot, but they also are very social compared to what we thought. They play around with their extended families, even 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. And so one of them, M3, male number 3, was out down in the bottom by Cosley Lake in the Belly River system. And M3 was being tracked by the satellite, which puts out a ping every 5 minutes, right? So just to save the battery. And M3 was wrestling with his kid, his 2-year-old kid, and wanted to take a walk. So he goes across Cosley Lake, goes up a valley, goes up to a place where he goes around in a couple of little circles because he might have found something that smelled good. Who knows if he caught something. And then he went up the face of this mountain. We're talking from the bottom to the top of this mountain called Mount Cleveland, which is the tallest in the park.
10,466.
That's right. And went to the very top of it, straight up this face in the winter when there's 15 feet of snow up there. And so we're talking, that's a climb. 90 minutes from the bottom to the top. And then he got bored at the top. There wasn't any food, so he went down into the Waterton Valley on the far side and took a nap, and then woke up and then backtracked all the way to the top of the mountain again, and then back down playing with his kid 24 hours later.
Well, that's incredible.
Climbed Mount Cleveland twice in 24 hours.
That's
just ridiculous. So they are so tough that, it's like they're super tough. But the irony there is that they're tough that way, but they're very fragile when it comes to temperature because they have to stay high. They do it. They're sort of like pikas. The heat will kill them. And so they have to be at high elevations. You want to see wolverines in the summertime, you better be above the tree line for sure, because that's where they're going to have to be.
Yeah, one time in all of our years in the park,
Yeah.
one time a couple of years ago near Gunsight Passes where we caught a glimpse of one. So.
Yeah.
On a snowfield. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's that they love to be on the snow because it's cooler that way. Plus, they can, with the big feet, they can travel that way too. But they're fragile that way. So again, climate change could be big time affecting them. Some people say that if it keeps going the way it is going right now, the increase in average temperatures, they're going to end up in British Columbia, and we won't have any anymore. So, which would be pretty sad.
Yeah.
Not a sad note, but talk about a tough guy.
Sure,
No
sure.
kidding.
Wow, the amazing characteristics of all of the different wildlife in Glacier is what makes it so special.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an amazing place.
Denny, you've got so much knowledge. I want to take this in just a slightly different direction here. And if you were a bird, what bird would you be and why?
Oh man, I'd be a gray jay because I would have to still write books and things like that. So so I'd be a member of the Corvid family for sure. A gray jay or a raven, and maybe a magpie too. But with magpies, there's so many people that don't like them for whatever reason. You have to kind
I
of watch
like them.
out.
Yeah.
I know they're beautiful birds.
Yeah.
I think.
There.
Anyway, probably one of the Corvids.
Okay. Sarah, you've had back in the day when you were a kid, actually, right? Your dad had you walk out and take notes on the bluebird houses, and so you've got a long history of this sort of scientific research as well, isn't that right?
Yeah, my dad built a lot of bluebird houses. We grew up on 10 acres with horses and stuff, and we would help him assemble these bluebird houses, and he'd put them strategically around the perimeter of our property. And then every spring we would go out and empty the boxes of the mice nests. They would come move in the winter.
Right.
And so we'd get them out of there. And that was always a big deal, because the mice would be jumping around. There's babies and we're trying to catch them and they're crawling up our pant legs and stuff. But then we would make way for the females to move in and make their nest, the bluebirds to make their nest. And then throughout the season, as they're nesting, my dad had them numbered. He would give us a clipboard, and we'd have to go around and record. Box 4 has a nest, and it's got 4
that's
eggs
cool.
or whatever,
Yeah.
And so that was kind of fun. And then once in a while, we'd have swallows that would move in. But, the bluebirds are pretty territorial. So we would
They
get
are.
up on,
Yeah.
the fence line, and we'd be weaving on the fence because it was super flexible. And my sister, whoever was in there looking at the box, the other one had mullein in their hand and was waving it around, the tall
okay.
mullein,
Yeah.
because they would dive bomb us. But we just wanted to look. We weren't going to hurt them.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about they are very territorial.
Yeah.
In fact, they need to be probably 300 yards apart in terms of other bluebirds, but they can tolerate tree swallows right next door, like 20 feet away. So
Yeah.
if people put up nests for bluebirds, put up 2 and put them close together, and that way when the tree swallows come in and take one nest, they will defend against other tree swallows, and then vice versa for the bluebirds. But they'll tolerate each other just fine. So it's a really good idea to do that.
Yeah.
Plus, I have an unusual nest box specifically made for bluebirds, which has the openings under some eaves of a house, so because they're ground feeders and they see the hole that they can go into from the ground, as opposed to the tree swallows who are flying around and see the hole in a regular box. And so, if anybody wants I've got full-size templates for those if you want to build some. So,
That's great. Yeah.
Denny, you made a comment here in the studio that was fascinating to me to say, most people are traveling the trail, hiking and observing the scenic vistas, but how much they miss if we don't open our ears and hear the bird song through the trails. And encourage people to do that. Is there anything else? We have just a little bit of time left. Anything else in terms of recreating responsibly, or what we can do, what's our part in preserving such a treasure?
Well, the basic rule is to leave no trace. That's the whole thing. And the other thing is you can leave traces that are sort of invisible. One of the things that the park doesn't like us to do and is to call birds in using electronic bird calls and things like that. Because if it's during the nesting season, chickadees, for instance, would need 6,000 to 8,000 caterpillars in a 21-day period. And they're busy and they're using a ton of energy. And if they use any of that energy trying to scare off a fake bird from coming out of your phone, that could really be the fatal thing that allows their babies not to be able to survive. So it's really important to understand that calling birds in to see them, ethically, it's something that most of us birders have transcended. It's just a relatively new concept, but it's a really good thing. But the thing is, when you're hiking, just keep your head on a swivel. There's so much to see most of the time, and keep your ears open because I go birding. I just walk and listen, and when I hear the song, then I know where to look and I know what it is, and so that's how I find birds.
And if you don't know what it is, there's great tools out there for that, like the Merlin app.
Merlin is fantastic.
And you had said before it's
97%
accurate.
Yeah,
wow.
And it picks up some things that we don't hear too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you've given us some things that we didn't know, and we very much appreciate it. We thank you for joining us in the studio. Denny Olson, everybody, what a pleasure. So thank you so much.
Yes.
All you out there, follow us on Instagram at HikingFoolsMT to see some great photos from our recent adventures. And be sure to tune in next time. Check out more episodes online, and remember to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. I'm Josh.
And I'm Sarah.
And we are the Hiking Fools, encouraging you to always go